Look at what is left in this fire pit the morning after a burn. Gray powder, pale, chalky, completely weightless. The kind of thing you scoop into a trash bag without a second thought because it looks like the most useless substance imaginable, the remnant of something that already burned. The end of the story. And yet this exact powder, this morning after nothing, was considered so agriculturally valuable in pre-industrial Europe that it was traded by weight like a commodity. Farmers walked miles to collect it from neighbors. In parts of feudal England, the ash rights from a wood fire were sometimes written into land agreements because the people who worked the soil every day understood something that 3 centuries of industrial agriculture has spent considerable effort making you forget. That the powder left behind after wood burns is not the end of something useful. It is the beginning of something extraordinary. And the fact that it now goes into your trash can instead of your garden is one of the most expensive mistakes the modern world makes every single day without realizing it. What you're looking at is wood ash. Pure dry wood ash from any hardwood fire, fireplace, fire pit, or wood stove. And what it does when applied correctly to soil and around plants, simultaneously eliminates some of the most destructive garden pests on earth and delivers a mineral profile that rivals commercial fertilizer at a price point of exactly nothing. 2 completely separate and critical functions from a single material that your fire produces automatically, whether you want it to or not. The results are not subtle. Slugs and snails, which destroy more home garden crops globally than almost any other pest category, will not cross a dry ash barrier. Not reluctantly, not occasionally. They physically cannot cross it without fatal consequences to their moisture-dependent physiology. Aphid populations collapse in soil that has been amended with ash because the pH shift it creates disrupts the conditions that make aphid infestations explode. Fungus gnats, root maggots, and certain species of beetles that spend part of their life cycle in the soil avoid ash-treated ground entirely. At the same time, the potassium, calcium, phosphorus, and trace minerals in wood ash release directly into the soil in plant-available form, correcting deficiencies that would normally require a trip to the garden center and a specific product purchase. Pest control and soil fertility improvement happening simultaneously from something you were going to throw away. This is not a new discovery. It is not an experimental approach tested on a small plot somewhere. It is one of the oldest and most widely practiced agricultural methods in human history, and the evidence for its use spans continents and thousands of years of documented farming practice. Traditional farmers across sub-Saharan Africa have used wood ash on crops for generations as both a pest deterrent and a soil amendment, a practice so embedded in certain agricultural communities that it is still the primary input many small-scale farmers apply to their fields today. In South and Southeast Asia, ash from rice hull burning has been worked into paddy field soils as a standard potassium and silica amendment for centuries. Across Eastern Europe and rural Russia, wood ash was historically stored carefully through winter and applied to kitchen gardens in spring with the same deliberate intention that modern gardeners apply purchased fertilizer. The method was not primitive or approximate. It was refined through generations of direct observation into a precise understanding of how much to apply, when, and to which crops. That knowledge existed everywhere that people burned wood and grew food simultaneously, which was essentially the entire world until very recently. So here is the question that deserves an honest answer. If this material is this effective, this historically validated, and this universally available, why does almost no mainstream gardening resource lead with it? Why is the first recommendation when someone describes pest damage or depleted soil always a product? Why did this knowledge fade so completely from common practice that most people alive today have never seriously considered using the ash from their own fireplace on their own plants? The agrochemical industry generates over $250 billion annually across its fertilizer, pesticide, and soil amendment sectors combined. Every one of those dollars depends on the normalized belief that soil problems require purchased solutions. Wood ash is the structural enemy of that belief. It is free. It is produced automatically as a byproduct of heating your home. It cannot be patented. It cannot be formulated into a proprietary product because it is already a finished material the moment it cools. There is no version of wood ash that a corporation can improve upon, brand, and sell back to you at a markup that makes the economics work. So the conversation never gets directed toward it. The garden center display never features a section labeled "Use Your Fireplace Ash." The agricultural extension pamphlet never opens with what you already have at home for free. The knowledge does not disappear because it stops working. It fades because it generates no revenue for any of the systems that shape what most people learn about growing food. You have been producing this material your entire life if you have ever had a fire. Every bonfire at a family gathering, every winter evening with the fireplace burning, every backyard fire pit session, every batch of ash you scooped out and put in the trash was a season's worth of pest protection and soil minerals going into a landfill instead of into the ground where it would have done something extraordinary. The gap between what you already had and what you were paying for was never a gap in the material. It was always only a gap in the knowledge. Here is the science of why this works, and it is clean and simple enough to understand completely in under 2 minutes. Wood ash is strongly alkaline. When dry hardwood burns, the minerals it extracted from the soil over its lifetime, primarily potassium, calcium, and magnesium, concentrate in the ash as carbonates and oxides. Those compounds are alkaline by chemistry, meaning they carry a high pH. When you apply wood ash to soil, it raises the local pH, shifting the soil chemistry toward alkaline conditions. That shift does several things simultaneously. It unlocks nutrients that were chemically trapped in acidic soil, making them suddenly available to plant roots that had been unable to access them. It creates conditions that many soil-borne pathogens and fungal diseases find hostile, reducing incidence of root rot, damping off, and fungal leaf problems. And it delivers potassium directly into the soil in plant-available form, which is one of the 3 primary macronutrients plants need for fruiting, flowering, and overall structural strength. The pest control mechanism works through 2 entirely separate pathways. For soft-bodied crawling pests like slugs and snails, dry wood ash is lethal on contact. These creatures move on a mucus layer they secrete continuously, and that mucus layer is mostly water. Dry ash absorbs moisture with extraordinary efficiency. When a slug attempts to cross an ash barrier, the ash pulls moisture from its body surface faster than it can secrete replacement mucus, causing rapid desiccation. The pest does not choose to avoid ash as a preference. It physically cannot survive contact with a dry ash barrier. For soil-dwelling insects and larvae, the alkalinity of ash-amended soil disrupts the pH range they require for their larval stage development. Many pest species have extremely narrow pH tolerances during their soil phase life cycle, and ash shifts conditions outside those tolerances efficiently enough to reduce or eliminate populations that would otherwise emerge as adult pests. Here is exactly how to use wood ash effectively, and the application is simple enough that the entire method fits in a single afternoon. Start by collecting and drying your ash. Any wood ash from hardwood fires works well. Ash from softwoods like pine contains more resin residue and should be used more sparingly. Coal ash is not suitable for this application and should be kept separate. Collect your ash in a dry container and make sure it has fully cooled before handling. Fresh ash can contain live embers that are not visible. A 24-hour waiting period after the fire is sufficient for safety. For pest barriers, apply dry ash in a ring around individual plants or along the perimeter of entire beds you want to protect. The barrier needs to be at least 2 inches wide and should remain dry to function effectively. Rain will neutralize a dry ash barrier by wetting it, so reapplication after precipitation is necessary. Check your barriers after watering too, as overhead irrigation will wet the ash and require refreshing. The barrier works precisely as long as it stays dry. This is not a set and forget application. It is a maintained system that rewards consistency. For soil amendment, apply ash to the surface of your planting beds at a rate of roughly 1 to 2 pounds per 10 square feet of garden area and work it into the top few inches of soil. Do this in autumn for spring planting beds or in early spring before planting. The alkalinity needs time to integrate into the soil chemistry and find equilibrium, rather than creating a harsh, localized concentration right at the root zone. Ash applied and immediately planted over can cause pH shock in seedlings if concentrated directly around roots before it has dispersed into the broader soil profile. For foliar pest deterrents, dry ash can be dusted lightly over plant leaves early in the morning while dew is still present, allowing it to adhere. This deters certain crawling pests that move up stems to reach foliage, and the alkaline surface discourages some soft-bodied insects from feeding. Reapply after rain. Here is what most people get wrong when they try this, because the failures are consistent and predictable and nearly always trace back to the same three errors. The most damaging mistake is applying too much ash in too small an area. Wood ash is powerful. A little integrated across a bed improves conditions dramatically. A large amount dumped in one spot can push soil pH so high that it becomes hostile to plants rather than beneficial to them. Most vegetables and fruits prefer a pH between 6 and 7. Wood ash can push soil above 8 if heavily applied without integration or without knowing your starting pH. Test your soil before using ash as a regular amendment and apply conservatively. You can always add more over time. You cannot easily undo a severe pH overcorrection in an established bed. The second mistake is using wet or damp ash. Wet ash does not deter slugs. Wet ash does not create a functional barrier of any kind. Wet ash compacted into a ring around your plants is essentially decorative. Dry is the operative word for every pest control application. Store your ash in a covered container if you live in a humid climate. The third mistake is applying ash to acid-loving plants. Blueberries, azaleas, rhododendrons, and potatoes all prefer acidic soil. Applying wood ash around these plants is actively harmful to them. Know which plants in your garden thrive in alkaline conditions and which require acidity before deciding where to apply. The historical depth of this practice stretches back to agricultural systems that predate most of what we think of as organized civilization, and the sophistication of those systems challenges the assumptions we carry about what ancient farmers understood. The slash-and-burn agricultural method, practiced across every continent where forests existed and traditional farming communities developed, was not the blunt destructive force its name implies when practiced in its original context. Controlled burning of cleared vegetation and the incorporation of resulting ash into planting soil was a deliberate fertility management strategy that delivered a concentrated burst of potassium, phosphorus, and calcium to planting sites that could sustain intensive cultivation for several seasons. The Norse and Germanic peoples of early medieval northern Europe practiced what historical records describe as ash fertilization on a systematic scale, rotating wood ash application across fields in cycles that maintained productivity in ways that puzzled later agricultural historians who expected primitive methods to produce degraded soils. They did not. The soils on sites of long-term Norse settlement show mineral profiles consistent with consistent ash amendment over generations. The Roman agricultural writer Columella, whose first-century texts represent the most comprehensive surviving record of Roman farming practice, specifically recommended wood ash application for vine cultivation and listed it alongside manure as a primary fertility input, not as a folk remedy, as established best practice backed